Welcome to the Kimberlite webinar to take a comprehensive look at the subsea equipment market. My name is David Batt, President of Kimberlite Research, and I'm glad you can join and attend this webinar today. This is our 40th Kimberlite webinar hosted on behalf of the oil and gas operators who participate in our industry research. These webinars are provided as a professional courtesy and a thank you to the many oil and gas operators around the world who participate in our Kimberlite industry surveys. In past webinars, we've taken a comprehensive look at the drilling services market, artificial lift, hydraulic fracturing, completions, as well as taking a big look at the big four oil field service providers. If you or your colleagues would like access to these prior webinars, just reach out to us and let us know. We often collaborate with oil companies and provide lunch and learns and presentations. So let us know if you'd like to have a presentation for your company as well. Today, we'll be looking at the subsea equipment market, including subsea trees, control systems, umbilicals, flexibles, and manifolds, as well as providing updates on technology adoptions and trends, including how the big and the small subsea suppliers stack up competitively with service and technology. For those of you that are a little bit less familiar with Kimberlite research, I will provide a brief explanation as to the research and then dive into the report. Each year, Kimberlite conducts about 3,000 interviews with users of oilfield services globally. About half of our research is North America, half is international. We've interviewed well over 20,000 users of oilfield services globally and have amassed well over 800,000 supplier performance ratings for objective benchmarking. We provide a series of industry reports talking to geologists and geophysicists, drilling engineers and managers, completion engineers and managers, production. Today, we'll be covering the Subsea report for trees, control systems, umbilicals, flexible pipe, and manifolds based on interviews with Subsea managers around the world. The report today is based on interviews with 130 Subsea oil and gas customers worldwide. The trends that we'll be providing today from 2018 to 24 are based on over 400 customer interviews and over 17,000 performance ratings. The data set's fairly rich and multidimensional. In this particular exhibit, we cross-plot oilfield service company performance on the horizontal axis versus pricing competitiveness on the y-axis. Any oilfield service company plotted in the top right is positioned as a premium offering, cost more be worth it. Any oilfield service company based on customer reviews in the bottom left are viewed as a discount provider, providing good value, get what you pay for. Value advantaged in the bottom right, and any oilfield service company provider in the top left has their value proposition being challenged in the eyes of the end users and has an opportunity to improve performance or to adjust their pricing strategies down. So with that, let's get started. When we take a look into what's going on fundamentally in the subsea market and we look at operator sentiment, what we find is that globally, 2/3 of subsea oil and gas operators expect their expenditures for subsea equipment to increase over the next 3 years, about 30% of 1/3 holding flat, very few declining. The diffusion indices is extremely high, well above the 50 marker in all regions and sectors, be it majors and independents and national oil companies. We do see some divergence here, where you can see that the international and the national oil companies are growing their expenditures year on year at a pretty healthy rate of 12.7%. The worldwide average is up about 10%. And you can see that the growth in the Gulf of Mexico is moderating at a fairly healthy level. You can see that the Gulf of Mexico is more cyclical to price signals. Gulf of Mexico went into contraction mode during the COVID years of 2020, and then it came out very strongly, leading the growth, and then has since moderated. This subsequently, when you look at pricing trends, what we find is that about 3/4 of 74% of the subsea respondents that we talked to expect pricing to increase. This observation is held a little bit more strongly internationally and versus the Gulf of Mexico. But generally speaking, due to a tight supply of qualified equipment and personnel, we see pricing increasing about 8% over the next 12 months. This really presents an opportunity for the oil and gas operators to be really proactive in working with their subsea suppliers to put together solutions and try to put together best-in-class industry-proven solutions to help drive costs down and try to avoid a bunch of custom and bespoke designs. When we asked the oil and gas operators globally which key subsea technologies and services and developments are having the greatest impact, a positive impact on their subsea operations, it's an open-ended, unaided question. We placed a few comments off to the right just to provide a little color and texture, but generally speaking, the subsea oil and gas operators around the world talk about ROV and AUV improvements, followed by light well intervention and some integrity management type technologies for monitoring the integrity of the assets as being some leading technologies and services providing a lot of feedback. Off to the right, you can see some of the commentary, like mentioning a ProServe for the obsolete control systems that are out of warranty and need to be updated, all the way to Oceaneering, who has some industry-leading ROV technologies. When we asked the subsea oil and gas operators to kind of look to the future about how will they be operating their subsea fields of the future different than the way we do today, again, it's an open-ended question, but what we find is that most subsea oil and gas operators believe that the use of digitization, artificial intelligence, and data analytics will be a driving force for the subsea fields of the future, along with increased use of all electric systems and standardization and remote operations. When we ask the subsea oil and gas operators where they're seeing the biggest increases in their digital investment, what we find is that most of the investment tends to be around collecting more data through increased use of monitoring systems and sensors. And from that data, they begin to try to continue to invest to put that data in the proper structure from which they can begin to apply their analytics and algorithms to. You can see that on the top right-hand part of the screen, back in the 2018 survey, 44% of the subsea wells in their surveys were being actively monitored in some fashion, and today that's climbed to nearly 70%. So we clearly see that the subsea oil and gas operators are indeed investing more and more digitally. About 44% of the subsea operators, more so with the major oil companies, firmly believe that the use of AI and machine learning will certainly provide some benefits to their future subsea operations. And largely, these benefits are expected to be around predictive analysis modeling and production management. While I'm going through many of these technology and operational areas rather quickly, please feel free to reach out to Kimberlite at any time if you want to delve into more detail on any one of these topics. We've been talking about the use of all electric systems for subsea fields now for 10 to 15 years, and we do realize that most operators don't necessarily want to be the first one to deploy the technology, and they're also waiting for it to be economic before it's used. And we see a little bit more of a tepid adoption rate of about 38% of the subsea operators worldwide saying they do have some plans to use all electric systems someday into the future. Most of the applications initially are going to focus around trees, followed by subsea chokes and manifolds. In terms of the jobs or services benefiting most from remote operations, well monitoring and inspections, particularly the integrity of the assets, be it fixed, rotating, or topside, or splash zone, or seafloor, are all areas where remote operations are yielding benefits to the subsea oil and gas operators. About half of the investment for subsea is new project greenfield, and about half is brownfield. And then we also find that in the eyes of the subsea oil and gas operators, CapEx is still the key driving force as to whether or not a project moves forward. And as you can see that the majority of the major oil companies, 63%, and the majority of the national oil companies at 87%, believe that integrated EPCI agreements and with their subsea suppliers, be it with OneSubsea or TechnipFMC or Baker Hughes, will lead to making the projects more economic. The independent operators, commonly active in the Gulf of Mexico, you can see about 2/3 of them do not believe that an integrated EPCI drives to the best economic outcome, and they really prefer to use a hybrid sourcing strategy, selecting best-in-class suppliers for their various services, be it for ProServe for a control system or Trendsetter for manifolds, Oceaneering for umbilicals and ROVs and such. When you turn to umbilicals, as you know, Aker Solutions recently became part of SIA, and this is changing the competitive landscape for umbilicals. But historically, umbilicals have been purchased separately about 50% of the time outside of the integrated EPCI arrangements. This is because Aker Solutions and Oceaneering traditionally combined make up about 2/3 of the umbilical market, and they're typically not very active in integrated EPCIs, unlike TechnipFMC, for example. In terms of where the subsea oil and gas operators are looking for improvements, the two common areas of greatest need are improvements with subsea trees and control systems. And the majority of the help that they need is with improved delivery times for subsea trees. The delivery times for subsea trees are continually getting pushed out to the right, which is delaying project execution and first oil. The number one need for subsea control systems is improved reliability, followed by improved delivery times. You can see it on the blue bar off to the left here on this chart that the typical lead time for a tree is close to 20 months, but the operators really desire those lead times to be half that. And so there really needs to be a lot of collaboration, if you will, between the subsea oil and gas operators and the subsea suppliers to try to reduce this time. Having an optical feed through is something that's becoming a little bit more important to some operators as a must have, about 1 in 5, but still about half of the subsea oil and gas operators say that they currently do not require this, but they may likely require it one day into the future to help fulfill their digital aspirations for their subsea fields of the future. Local content still continues to be very important. And in terms of particularly of the international, it's critical that they won't use some of the suppliers unless there's local content. ESG expenditures still remain high amongst the subsea oil and gas operators, a large focus around emissions reduction and monitoring, followed by carbon capture. And TechnipFMC, Baker Hughes, and OneSubsea, Schlumberger are all viewed quite strongly as being very capable suppliers to help the subsea oil and gas operators to achieve their ESG objectives. Oceaneering is also cited for a lot of their innovative remote technologies with the AUVs and ROVs. Carbon capture tends to be the number one area for investment in new energy technologies. And now let's transition gears really quick. Based on the feedback from the subsea oil and gas operators worldwide, we capture the strengths and the weaknesses in terms of market brand image of the various major subsea oil suppliers. What we find is that Baker Hughes has some negative correlations indicating that they have some brand image deficits as it relates to being a leader in subsea project management, best to partner with, and best for high pressure, high temperature, and aftermarket services. By contrast, if you take a look at OneSubsea, Schlumberger, these positive correlations indicate that Schlumberger OneSubsea has some really strong market brand images that extend beyond their customer base, and these are considered to be very much strengths for Schlumberger OneSubsea. Anything around the 0% line means that the image of brand image strength and leadership is in alignment with the customer base. So OneSubsea has a very strong brand image in the subsea market relative to that of Baker Hughes. When you take a look at the market share leader TechnipFMC, you find that TechnipFMC also has extremely strong market brand image that's in alignment with their customer base, which is the largest out there. And so, in large view, TechnipFMC's customers view TechnipFMC as being the leader for best project management, technical support, and aftermarket services. In many areas, such as technology leadership, best for high pressure, high temperature, and providing low cost of total ownership, TechnipFMC's brand image, market image for leadership extends beyond their customer base. You do see some decline and attenuation of TechnipFMC's image from 2020 to 24, declining for high pressure, high temperature, technical support, and for best aftermarket services. So we are seeing some shifting of TechnipFMC's market brand image. Oceaneering's brand image is viewed most strongly for project management. As you know, they have an offshore project management group that specializes in this area, coupled with technical support and strong aftermarket service. ProServe's also known for being able to deliver very cost-effective subsea control systems and best to partner with to reduce project cost relating to subsea control systems. When you take a look at the overall summary of the market brand image, starting with provides the lowest cost of total ownership, you can see that ProServe and TechnipFMC have the strongest brand images with these respective image factors. If you take a look at TechnipFMC here in orange and OneSubsea in blue, you can see that they both stand out for leadership for high pressure, high temperature, and technology leadership. and also best designs to address life of field issues. But you are beginning to see that OneSubsea's brand image is strengthening and begin to overtake TechnipFMC with respect to their respective customer bases. Shifting gears into the competitive landscape for subsea trees, what we find is that naturally TechnipFMC is the market share leader for subsea trees. And when we take a look at the performance trends for responsiveness to needs and equipment quality, competency of field service personnel, and technical support, what we're finding is that TechnipFMC and OneSubsea typically get the highest customer review ratings, but we're also beginning to see that OneSubsea's customer review ratings are starting to outpace TechnipFMC's. So when we translate this to the value map, what we do find is that TechnipFMC is the market share leader with a huge backlog and a large installed base. And TechnipFMC's performance is certainly meeting industry expectations, certainly in alignment with industry average. Even though they're the leader in subsea trees, they're not really demonstrating performance leadership any longer. OneSubsea from Schlumberger actually demonstrates performance leadership in its position as a premium-based supplier, where Baker Hughes is viewed as offering competitive pricing for trees with the performance lagging that of their peers. If you do a head-to-head analysis of OneSubsea, Schlumberger in blue versus TechnipFMC for subsea trees, you can see how TechnipFMC is really beginning to distinguish themselves as a lower cost alternative. This is also reflected in the margins and the profitability of TechnipFMC. TechnipFMC's profitability for subsea equipment and services is about 10 percentage points below that of Schlumberger. When you look at field service competency, you can see another strength for OneSubsea. When you take a look at TechnipFMC's competitive position on the value map, it is shifting in a negative direction from 22 to 24, whereas SLB OneSubsea is moving more and more into the premium positioning, and Baker Hughes's performance is improving. As we look at the competitive trends in the movement, you also see that the revenue growth rate tends to correlate to the competitive position of these three suppliers. The Net Promoter Score, which is a function of customer loyalty, very strong and stable for TechnipFMC. You see a trend of improvement for OneSubsea, who's now overtaking TechnipFMC and has somewhat of a commanding lead. TechnipFMC's customer loyalty ratings are on par with industry expectations, which again correlates to their industry average performance noted earlier. When we go into control systems, what we find is that the leader in control systems is ProServe. They're viewed as delivering the best overall value. And it's also important to note that the majority, 2/3 of control systems that are being replaced in the marketplace are being replaced because they're basically replacing obsolete systems. So they're retrofits and replacing of existing systems. So they're out of warranty. So this lends itself to an opportunity for ProServe to step out and provide some innovative solutions. And you're seeing more and more subsea operators who are concerned about lead times to step out and to pick up services from ProServe. ProServe has a consistent, strong customer loyalty rating as measured by the Net Promoter Score. When we move to the competitive landscape for subsea umbilicals, it's a very tight race between the three suppliers. Oceaneering, TechnipFMC, what used to be Aker Solutions, is now part of SLB OneSubsea and the SIA Alliance. When you take a look at the performance trends, what you typically find is that Oceaneering tends to be a performance leader in many of these factors, particularly technical support. And you also see improving performance by TechnipFMC. When you look at the competitive landscape, you'll see that Oceaneering and TechnipFMC are viewed very similarly competitively in the eyes and users of the subsea umbilical services from the subsea oil and gas operators. Oceaneering is edging out TechnipFMC ever so slightly. Aker Solutions are now SLB's pricing strategies have shifted. They used to be more in alignment with these other two suppliers, but SLB tends to focus on shareholder returns, and the financial returns for umbilicals have traditionally been very, very low, averaging around 10%, which is certainly below industry norm returns for most shareholders. When we move to flexible pipe, what we find is it's more of a two-horse race, with TechnipFMC and Baker Hughes as the market share leaders, followed by NOV. When we look at the competitive landscape for flexibles, what we find is that TechnipFMC is viewed as the performance leader, followed by Baker Hughes, and NOV is viewed as delivering fairly good value, but their performance is not viewed as being as strong as Baker Hughes and TechnipFMC, but the pricing is attractive, kind of placing them into this discount quadrant. When you do a head-to-head on the flexible pipe between TechnipFMC in orange and Baker Hughes in green, you can see that TechnipFMC's performance advantages over Baker Hughes are most strongly observed around service and support. Subsea manifolds is an area in which we've begun to see trendsetter engineering begin to step up and be used more with our customized engineered subsea solutions. When you look at the net promoter scores for subsea manifolds, you'll see that trendsetter followed by TechnipFMC has the highest customer loyalty as measured by the net promoter score at 57, 54% respectively. Baker Hughes's customer loyalty ratings are below industry average, sitting at 14%. If we just take a quick look at the ROV market really quick, Oceaneering is the market share leader. Oceaneering is also the performance leader. If we take a look at subsea wellheads, what we find is that it's a three-horse race between Baker Hughes, Drillquip, and TechnipFMC. And what we find is that TechnipFMC and Drillquip are the performance leaders for subsea wellheads, followed by Baker Hughes. If you take a look, if you're an oil and gas operator and you're trying to assess all the options that you have in a very tight market today, what you begin to realize is there's a host of specialty subsea providers, be it ProServe for subsea control systems, Trendsetter Engineering for manifolds and customized engineered subsea solutions, Masterflow for subsea chokes, Oceaneering for umbilicals, X-Pro for landing strings, Drillquip for subsea wellheads. That there's certainly lots of opportunities for the subsea oil and gas operators to look for alternative solutions to help speed up their project execution timeline. TechnipFMC and OneSubsea, as I just mentioned earlier, collectively, the two of these suppliers have over 80% of the subsea tree market and over 70% of the control system market. Baker Hughes is also a viable integrated third provider who may want to strategically align with some of these specialty providers to try to strengthen their presence in the market. This becomes even more prevalent in the Gulf of Mexico, where you have a high number of independent oil and gas subsea operators who are more open to breaking out of the integrated EPCI arrangements and to look for best-in-class specialty supplier performance here. If I were just to kind of look and summarize this really quick using our interactive dashboard, and if I were to come in and take a look at the product competitive positioning for TechnipFMC, you can see that just about all the product lines for TechnipFMC are meeting industry expectations on the performance axis. By contrast, if you take a look at OneSubsea, you can see that their trees and control systems are beginning to perform on par or better than FMC. And then you've got Baker Hughes in more of a discount quadrant. If you start to take a look at the movement that's occurred from 2022 to 2024 for TechnipFMC, and say we just focus on subsea trees here for a second, you can see, as we talked about earlier, how TechnipFMC is kind of moving in this southwesterly direction, and Schlumberger is moving more into this preeminent premium area. When we take a look at these performance trends between these suppliers, you can see that the industry overall is getting better, and TechnipFMC is improving as well, but so is OneSubsea, and they're starting to overtake TechnipFMC for subsea trees in many of these areas. We also see differences between OneSubsea and TechnipFMC between greenfield and brownfield. So certainly we see differences between the various suppliers, and the nice thing for you, the subsea oil and gas operators, is you have many different options to choose from. We encourage you to kind of lean in and learn about the strengths and weaknesses of the suppliers for which you have opportunities to leverage their services to meet your operational requirements. I want to thank everyone for watching this webinar. If you have any questions and want to delve into any more details amongst any of the suppliers or any of these product lines, please feel free to reach out. Thank you for your support of these industry studies, and we look forward to collaborating with you in the future. Thank you and goodbye.